I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I am Brian Karam, and if you don't know who I am, I'll tell you. I want to start by saying that I guess in some ways I was destined to be a reporter. My story starts with John F. Kennedy. I was a toddler, and my dad was the son of a ward healer in Louisville, Kentucky. The President of the United States came through. He got to the front of the reception line. I was about the same age as his son, John, at the time. And my dad was holding me in his arms as the President came through. And the President saw the baby, me, and my dad, oh, the President, handed the baby to him, and I promptly wet my diaper. And as my dad said, I've been pissing on politicians ever since. I really don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. The thing that I always heard growing up is if you're going to be a reporter, and this was taught to me by one of the very first people I ever met in the briefing room, Sam Donaldson. And Sam said, Brian, you will never know who I voted for because I will give everybody an equal amount of shit. And that's your job, truth to power. Today, I can tell you that the White House briefing room is not what it used to be. In fact, it's a far cry from what it used to be. You saw pictures up here earlier of my other mentor, who was Helen Thomas. Helen was notorious. I would applaud Helen every day. The very first day, and some people have heard me tell this story, but I'll tell it again because it's a good one. The first day I walked into the White House briefing room, I met Helen. She was the first person I met. She goes, I know who you are. That's how damn good Helen was. She knew everybody, and I said, how the hell do you know who I am? Well, as it turns out, she's a Lebanese girl, and she knew my great uncle. And my uncle had warned her that I was coming. So she knew who I was. She came in. She introduced me to Sam. Sam said, Brian, I want you to take a look. And by the way, I had a deja vu flashback moment as I walked in here tonight. Those 7 rows with 7 across is the exact size of the Brady briefing room where you guys are sitting. That's what we face every day, the seating assignments. And so I walked into the Brady briefing room. He said, Brian, take a look at the first row there, those 7 seats. There's more than 200 years of experience there. Learn from them. And then he said Helen had 190 of it. Helen turned to Sam and said something smart, and Sam said, Helen, it's okay to have an unexpressed thought. And Helen said, Sam, when it comes to you, I have a lot of unexpressed thoughts. Now, I didn't know what I was doing for the rest of my life, but I knew that day was golden. And I followed them around. Sam said he unapologetically followed Helen around. So I followed them around, and we went upstairs. Ronald Reagan was the president at the time. We walked upstairs, and nobody gave Helen grief. In fact, Joe Lockhart, who was one of Clinton's press secretaries, used to bring her coffee and donuts every morning. She would sit outside of his office. One day he said to her, and I witnessed this event, he said to Helen, he goes, why are you sitting out here? And she goes, you really are a dumb son of a bitch, aren't you, Joe? And he goes, okay, I'll bite. Why am I a dumb son of a bitch? She goes, I can sit here and watch what you all are doing, and I know what's going on before you do. That's the kind of reporting we used to have. So I walked up there on the first day, Helen knocking on the door, Larry speaks, get your ass out here and speak to us. About that time, and I'm standing there, I'm 24 years old, I kept my mouth shut. Out walks a Secret Service agent. He says, you all have to leave. The president's coming through to talk to Larry. So Helen said, I'm not leaving. He goes, yes, you are. She goes, I'll be back. He goes, I know you will. So she turned around and left. Sam left. And as I turned to follow them, I was nervous, and I tripped and I fell. And I was on my knees in the White House upper press room. And as I stood there, I felt this large hand on my shoulder. And I turned around expecting to see a Secret Service agent ready to punch me in the face. But it was President Ronald Reagan. And he turned, he looked at me and said, well, son, you don't have to bow in front of me. And that was my first day at the White House. It is a remarkably beautiful place to be. And I have been there off and on since then. And as a reporter, I have been kicked out of the Senate of Texas. I was jailed 4 times in a case that went to the Supreme Court to try and keep a confidential source. I've been threatened, harassed, and beaten. I've covered conflicts in 6 different areas of the world. And with Donald Trump, Jim Acosta, my buddy of mine who I invited here tonight who can't be here for personal reasons, but Jim and I were the only 2 reporters to have our press passes taken from us. I fought and defeated Donald Trump in court 3 times to keep my press pass. And by God, I will not bow to him or any other freaking politician. Our job is to speak truth to power. Our job is to ask the tough questions. Donald Trump got upset with Caitlin Collins last week because she asked him a question, and he goes, "Why can't you just come in here and ask nice things? Why can't you do that?" Well, because that's not our job. That's propaganda. The problem in the White House, and I will not be at the White House Correspondents Association dinner this year for one simple reason. At the beginning of this administration, the White House Correspondents Association published the president's daily schedule called Guidance. President Trump didn't have anybody doing it. The WHCA picked up the slack and did it for them. That is not our job. That is a conflict of interest. We are not here for access. It's not access journalism. It should never be about access. You use your access the proper way by building relationships and by building sources. And by the way, if you're working in the White House, you're not my friend. You may be a source. After you leave, as I've told many people, after you leave, if you want to come over to the house for a barbecue, you're more than welcome. But when you're in that office and you're representing the President of the United States, my job is to hold truth to power. You cannot be one of my close friends. And you're not coming over to the house for a barbecue either. So that's a tough thing to do these days when people want access. And the President of the United States in this incarnation has not only threatened the press corps, but today the executive producer of 60 Minutes quit because he said that he cannot continue to do his job in good faith as the ownership of CBS Paramount has decided to deal with Donald Trump. Kiss the ring. I'm sorry, folks. That is the end of free speech if we do not stand up. And let me tell you something from experience. Donald Trump is a cheap schoolhouse bully. It doesn't take anything to stand up to him. You just have to do it. And I'm sorry, but there are plenty of people who simply will not do it. There's a lot I want to go through before I introduce a couple of videos. I want to talk about Ben Bagdikian, but let me talk about Ben first. Ben was the former editor at the Washington Post. I want to read something he said, and you can put it up so everybody can see it. He said, "The safest way to ensure diversity of opinion is diverse ownership. But this ideal has been sacrificed by our government. There are 6 major companies that own 95% on a national level what you see, read, or hear. 45% of the counties in this country, that's damn near half the counties in this country, there is no local press. They're in places in Iowa, places in Wisconsin, all across this country. And guess what? In those counties where there is no local press, Donald Trump won overwhelmingly in 91% of those counties." He also said, and this is speaking to newspapers that we have today, next slide, if you will. "Trying to be a first-rate reporter on the average American newspaper is like trying to play Bach's St. Matthew Passion on a ukulele. The instrument is too crude for the work, for the audience, and for the performer." He said that 30 years ago. Today, we have newspapers that no longer even have copy editors. I've often heard it said that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only stupid answers. And for an example of that, I'll go to a time before I was a reporter, Betty Ford. There was a young reporter fresh off the choo-choo, and back during the day in the White House, your first job was not to be in the pool covering the president. You had to cover the vice president, or you had to cover the first lady. So this one reporter fresh off the choo-choo is walking along. Betty Ford is in the East Wing, and he says to her, do any of your kids ever smoke pot? And all of the reporters said, oh my God, what a stupid question. You can't ask the First Lady that. That's ridiculous. How could you ask that question? Right up until the point where she turned to the reporter and said yes. Then they said, holy shit, he's brilliant. It isn't the question. So even if you ask the question today, which many reporters often do in today's White House, the question boils down to something like, Mr. President, you're really great. How do you shoot rainbows out of your ass? And that is the quality of question that we're getting from 90% of the reporters. And I want to warn you about something else. And this you've got to take to heart. The president's move to ban the AP did not work. The courts told him he couldn't do it. So what did he do? He banned all of the pools. Who has the most experience? Those people in the wire services. Two reporters in particular he was gunning for, Steve Holland and Jeff Mason, who are with Reuters. He doesn't want the questions asked. And I'll go to this question that I asked Donald Trump in his first administration, and this is why you won't see me in the White House today, if we can go to that.
Win, lose, or draw in this election, will you commit here today for a peaceful transferal of power after the election? And there has been rioting in Louisville, there's been rioting in many cities across this country, red and your so-called red and blue states. Will you commit to making sure that there is a peaceful transferal of power after the election?
Well, we're going to have to see what happens. You know that I've been complaining very strongly about the ballots, and the ballots are a disaster.
I understand that, but people are rioting. Do you commit to making sure that there's a peaceful transferal of power?
We want to get rid of the ballots, and we'll have a very peaceful. There won't be a transfer, frankly. There'll be a continuation. The ballots are out of control. You know it. And you know who knows it better than anybody else? The Democrats know it better than anybody else.
I want to tell you, the President of the United States said there won't be a peaceful transfer. Don't have to worry about a transfer of power if you stop counting the ballots. 6 weeks before the insurrection, he told us that if he lost, there was going to be one. Take that to heart. With that, if we can play the next tape, this is a compendium of reporters asking the tough questions before the President of the United States. Hit it.
If I may ask one other question, Mr. President, if I may ask one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President,
that's
I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President, are you?
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Mr. President, are you worried about indictments coming down in this investigation?
Go ahead, Peter. Go ahead.
In Jim's defense, I've traveled with him and watched him. He's a diligent reporter who busts.
Well, I'm not a big fan of yours either. So
I understand.
To be honest.
So let me ask you a question, if I can.
Don't ask me. Ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you. I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty
Please
question.
go ahead. Head in the back, please.
I have two questions.
No, it's okay.
But
We'll
you
go over
pointed
here.
to me. I have two questions, Mr.
Next.
President.
Next, please.
Are you going to include the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional
Well, I
Hispanic
would.
Caucus?
I tell you what. Do you want to
as well
set
as
up
on
the meeting?
Senate
Do you want to set up the meeting?
No.
Are they friends of
I'm
yours?
Just a reporter.
No, set up the
I
meeting.
know some of them, but I'm sure
Let's
they're
go.
watching
Set up
right
a
now.
meeting.
So your own government stats are wrong, you say?
No. I use many stats.
Could
I
you
use
share
many
those stats with us?
Let me tell you, you have stats that are far worse than the ones that I use. But I use many stats. But I also use Homeland Security. All right, next
And
question.
wait a minute, just a quick follow-up.
Go, please.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I
Jeff
asked.
Mason, the one who's banned now.
It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country. And I say in many cases, the corrupt media, because you're corrupt. Much of the media in this country is not just fake, it's corrupt.
Which is why I ask, this can't be the real timeline. It really can't. I'll go back to Ben Bagdikian, who said, never forget that your obligation is to the people. It is not, at heart, those who pay you, or to your editor, or to your sources, or to your friends, or to the advancement of your career. It is to the public. Now, those people are doing what we're supposed to do, and they are not allowed in the White House today. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the last thing Donald Trump wants is accountability. He calls us the enemies of the people. We are the people. We are your representatives there. And no one knows the problems of Donald Trump better than a very good friend of mine. I call her my little sister. She would have loved to have been here tonight supporting Kids Scoop Media, but she's not. But she and a few others taped this for us. And I want to introduce to you my good friend, Mary Trump. Mary Trump, thanks for being here. I gotta ask you, man. Here we are.
Here we are.
And first, how serious is Donald's threat to free speech? And do you think he cares?
Okay. I think at this point it is a waste of our time to pretend that there is any redemption here, that there are any redeeming characteristics. This is a man who has had very serious psychiatric disorders that have gone untreated for decades. He's only getting worse. I've said this many times. There's no worst. Things will only continue to get worse. He is, I refer to him as a black hole of need. And because there is nothing that can fill that need, he tries to go after other things, and he has been unimpeded in that effort. It's money, it's power, it's revenge, it's cruelty. We're seeing all of this play out right now. He will do anything in his power, and thanks in part to the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court, thanks to the fascist Republican Party, thanks to over 74 million Americans who decided that this was a good idea. There is no reining him in anymore. Trump.
How does it end?
Well, and just the second question really quickly first. He's never read the Constitution. He doesn't care about it. It is, I mean, if he understood how to make a fire, which he doesn't, he would use it as kindling. But, the Republican Party has been doing that for a long time. So how does it end? And that is a very good question. I mean, I don't have an answer, unfortunately. The problem is several-fold, but I'll just deal with a couple of the folds. One is that I had been hoping for a long time that the pressure would get to him, that he would suffer such severe narcissistic injuries that he would sort of implode. But he is so protected now. He's surrounded by so many sycophants. Like, we know that a bunch of bad polls came out the other day. I would be shocked if he'd seen them. We saw the Supreme Court hand down, essentially, it's a little more complicated than this, but essentially a 9-0 decision against Donald and the executive branch. In the Oval Office, Donald said to Stephen Miller, hey, we won that 9-0, right? And Stephen Miller said, yes, we did. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in our favor. Nobody is telling this deeply damaged, destroyed human being the truth about anything that would bring him down. So he's buffered. His very, very fragile ego is being protected at all costs by people who need him, who are using him. So it's not going to end that way, unfortunately, because that would have been the simplest thing. The only other thing I'm hoping for, and this is a horrible thing, and as an American who actually deeply cares about this country, it is a horrible thing to hope for, that they continue to overreach so badly. They continue to scare the American people so badly and make our lives so much worse that there will finally come a moment of reckoning where people just say enough and no more, and they shut it all down. That is the only way I see out of this.
My question to you, we have young reporters with us tonight, and people want to know how the press works. What do you recommend to young reporters? What do you recommend to the future? What do you recommend to those of us who are still in the business? How do you conduct yourself in this administration?
Well, one thing you taught me recently is answer the right question. Your show is Just Ask the Question. Just ask the right question. Frame your question in a way that you're going to get an answer that is the truth or that is obviously a lie. Do not give these people any room to prevaricate, because if you give them an inch, they will take the universe seriously. So that is one thing you taught me. The other thing I think we've all learned from experience is stop pretending that both sides have the same legitimate things to say. The journalists should be neutral as to the facts, and they should be biased in favor of democracy. A free press cannot survive without a strong democracy. Our democracy, I mean, I don't even know if we have one anymore, but to the extent we do, it is on the brink, and it is going to require journalists with courage to make sure that they hold the powerful to account. And you cannot do that if you start from a false premise that both sides are somehow equal. That way lies madness, and that way lies fascism.
And on that, Mary, that was beautiful. I appreciate you being here and taking the time to be with us. You know I love you. And anything, anytime for you.
All right. I love you too, my brother.
All righty. Take care, and we'll be right back.
My next guest is a guy that ran against Donald Trump, a former member of the Tea Party, who was and still still communicates with MAGA members, but has come out vociferously against Donald Trump and where this is going. I want to introduce you to Joe Walsh, not the guitar player, but the former Congressman Joe Walsh, if we can hit that.
And so, Joe, I brought you in because I think you get it. I think you understand better than most what the challenges are for free speech. In that, we're not even 100 days into this new administration, and already I say, free speech is gone. What say you?
I'm right there with you, my brother, and it's good to be with you, Brian. It is gone.
Good to be with you.
It is gone. Look, he told you and I he was going to be a tyrant. He's acting like a tyrant. He is a tyrant, and we have no legislative branch to be a check on him. The courts are overwhelmed. So he's got free reign, Brian, to do whatever he wants to do. He feels like he's an untouchable. And so we're seeing him going after freedoms, freedom of speech and other freedoms. We're seeing him going after private individuals, law firms, private companies, media companies, universities. And I don't know when it stops. I think we talk often about, oh my God, this is a constitutional crisis. It's beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's in the rearview mirror myself. What do you recommend? What do you recommend that people do?
That's such a great question, right? Because you and I talk about this a lot. All we do, too many people just bitch and moan about Trump.
Yes,
he sucks. I don't want to do that for 4 years. I like that question you asked. What can we do? I think, here's what I think. Congress is gone. I don't think the courts are going to save us. He's going to defy court orders. You, me, the people are the last line of defense. What's been cool is we've been protesting, and these protests are growing. Brian, I believe, like all good tyrants, he's all about shutting down individual freedom. And I believe that in his world, we don't need no stinking midterms. In his world, declare martial law, whatever, put the military out on the street, whatever. I think when the weather warms up, there are millions and millions protesting now, another one out on April 19th. I think Trump is licking his chops to go after protesters. So I think things are going to get bumpy and violent. I think people like you and I and the American people are going to be in a position where we're literally going to have to practice civil disobedience. It's going to get there.
Yeah, and then the idea of opening up El Salvador as a supermax and shipping real, just natural-born citizens there, right? I mean, it kind of reminds me of Escape from New York, when they turned Manhattan into a supermax. Where's Snake Plissken when you need him?
Just such a good movie. That was such a good movie. No, I'll tell you what, Brian. You and I are not kids anymore. I was really depressed 2 days ago when he had the El Salvador president in the Oval Office. It was just a dark, dark day. What did he say? He basically said, I don't give a fucking damn about due process for the guy they mistakenly sent down there. And he said what you said again. Yeah, I'd like to send American citizens down there. This is dark, scary, chilling stuff. And if it doesn't impact you that way, then you've forgotten what America is. So I really do believe, Bri, I don't know how it's going to play out, but we're the ones who are going to have to defend our civil liberties. Quite literally, physically, we're going to have to defend them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, look, I wish you were out here with us in LA for this town hall, but I do appreciate you showing up, Joe, because you're one of the guys. I respect you a lot for what you do and what you've gone through, and I wish you the best of luck, my friend. I hope to see you soon.
I'm going to say one thing right back to you. There's no better defender of free speech and of free press than Brian Karem, and I know of a few people who will take a bullet to defend free speech and a free press. You're at the front of that line, so keep doing it, Brian.
I would prefer
Thank
not
you, brother.
to be.
And thanks for joining us. We'll be right back.
Well, I'm telling you, it's a tough room, you know. I don't want to be at the front of the line. I have one last guest, and then we're going to bring the panel out and have a discussion about free speech in the arts. But this last person that I'm going to introduce to you, we just talked to this morning. He wanted to be out here, can't be. He actually lost his clearance to get classified information. He has defended whistleblowers. He's an attorney. He's defended whistleblowers against Republicans and Democrats. But because he stood up to Donald Trump screwed him. I want to introduce you to Mark Zaid.
And our next guest is Mark Zaid. Mark actually needs no introduction if you've ever read any of the guidance coming out of the White House, because he's the attorney. He's a FOIA expert, so Freedom of Information Access requests, and also has a lot to do with national security and has represented whistleblowers for against numerous administrations, both Republican and Democrat. However, as I said, his name is awful familiar to you if you've ever read the daily guidance from the current president, because he was named specifically as someone they want to take away his access to classified information. Mark, thanks for joining us for this conversation. I guess my big question to you is how dangerous is what's going on to the Constitution? How does it affect you personally? How does it affect the country?
Right. So I've had a security clearance, authorized access to classified information for over a quarter century, including through both Democratic and Republican administrations, including in the first Trump administration where they actually increased my access to a higher level of eligibility, notwithstanding why they're taking away or have taken away my clearance now. But this is significant and impacts my ability to represent many, many clients. Most of my clients are often intelligence officers, and I have to have access to classified information to represent them. It has nothing to do with politics. It's just, they're employment cases within the different agencies. I often never deal with the White House. I'm not a political guy. I try to stay out of politics. Although, again, I've represented Republican members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress. It doesn't matter to me. I go after them all. It's all about accountability. But what happened to me as I got grouped in a very austere and prominent sort of circle of individuals, all of whom, other than me, were political. They were either elected Democratic officials or they served in Democratic administrations, and they are ideological, which is nothing wrong with that on either side, but that's not me. So effectively what happened is the Trump administration, in taking away the security clearances of those perceived to be political enemies or legal adversaries, might has just, taken away the clearances of anyone who's Jewish, or anyone who's Muslim, or any women, or any homosexuals, or any Democrats. Take all those clearances away, because there's no difference, because none of us did anything that individually impacted our security clearances in a way that was detrimental to the national security interests of the United States. So it was just this broad brush. I don't like you, clearance gone.
How dangerous is that for the, obviously it's dangerous, but if you can spell out as far as free speech and the ability,
we'll go to habeas corpus if you want, but I mean, how dangerous do you find this behavior to be in reference to free speech?
Well, it is the notion of, are we living in a monarchy where the king is in power versus a republic or a democracy where there is a process? And the one thing we have seen in this administration, far more than the first administration, although it was desired, it just wasn't implemented in the same way, was any decision that emanates from the President of the United States, that's it. No due process that surrounds it, whether it's deporting someone, from the state of Maryland who's perceived or is illegally here in the United States, no due process. Declaring someone to be a gang member, maybe they are, but no due process. Firing individuals like whom of folks I'm representing without having done anything wrong, but no due process to be able to defend that action. So this is part and parcel to it. Some lawyers have had their clearances suspended. Others, like myself, had their clearances revoked. Most of the people didn't even have a clearance who were targeted by the President of the United States. But that's besides the point. That's a different issue. But look, this is the sort of the definition of what type of government do we have, where we grew up understanding there are three branches of government that are co-equal, whereas in the Trump administration, their view is the executive branch is the dominant and sole branch, and the others only exist to serve what the executive wants.